Ms. Hines and I, what we're going to talk about is visible learning. If you remember all the way back to the first week of school, Ms. Morris and Mr. Nichols talked to us about John Hattie's visible learning from a conference that we went to this summer. And then at the end of August, we went back for a second session, and that was all about feedback. And just to remind you about what visible learning is, there's a set of 150 criteria that John Hattie researched or pulled research data from to determine what are the biggest factors that have an impact on student learning. Some of those we have no control over, like preterm birth weight or what they do in their summer vacation or how much TV they watch, but there are a lot of things that we do have control over and we do have impact on. And one of those is feedback. So student-to-teacher feedback, teacher-to-teacher feedback, and teacher-to-student feedback. So out of these 150 criteria that he has researched, John Hattie has found that feedback ranks 10th most effective. So that is something we can definitely be doing in our classrooms that will help build our students up to a greater level. And selfishly, y'all just got back from with Dr. Ash about evaluation. Feedback is a big part of our evaluation process, or an aspect of our evaluation process. And so to get a 5 on the evaluation in this part of it, in this part of the rubric, we need to be consistently giving oral and written feedback. Feedback is frequently given during guided practice and homework. Teacher circulates to prompt student thinking and gets student feedback to help guide learning. So what Ms. Hines and I will do today is try to give you some tools that you can implement in your classroom to help you with this aspect of the team rubric. All right, so feedback questions, where am I going? This is all about learning intentions, goals and targets, how clear the goals and targets are given to students. And so that's why we post our standards on the board or have them so our students can see them, so they know where the lesson is going and they know what they have to learn throughout the course of the lesson. How am I going there? These are some strategies you can use: engineering effective classroom discussions, questions, learning tasks, encouraging students to see themselves as owners of their own learning. So a big part of effective feedback is getting students to buy in to their own learning process. And the last question, where to next? Students should be able to determine where they're going and what they need to learn to improve on the skills, whether it's math, science, English, social studies, what have you. All right, so learning intention and success criteria. Learning intentions and success criteria are the basis for giving effective feedback. The purpose of feedback is to close the gap in students' learning. And to effectively close this gap, it's important to communicate the intended goal or learning intention to students. So when you came in and sat down, there were 2 pieces of paper on the desk. One of those is an art lesson. And so I want y'all to read that lesson and answer the 2 questions at the bottom. And those are, what is the learning intention and what is the success criteria? When you get done, you can just talk to your neighbor about it, and then we'll go over it.
Every day.
I'm sorry. I just identify probably not as yeah, so that she'll come back and like that's what they say, like, we'll start today. That's fun. Yeah, I don't think I'd be successful at that.
Definitely. Yeah, I may not be successful right here,
No.
but I would do the best I
Alright, so what is the learning intention of this? And think generally, because this particular lesson is about Pablo Picasso, but this art teacher could use this same thing for Rembrandt or Da Vinci or Michelangelo. So it doesn't have to be specific to Picasso, but what are the learning intentions? Anybody?
Learn about an artist.
Yeah, learn about an artist.
What influenced their art?
Alright.
Or
Yeah.
their style.
Artist influences, artist style. Anything else?
Medium.
Medium.
Art history.
Yeah, a little bit of art history. Okay, and so what is the success criteria so that this art teacher knows that his or her students have mastered the content?
The art they created.
All right, the painting and whether the painting reflects the shapes and styles of a Picasso painting or a Da Vinci
Yeah.
painting. Anything else? What, Mr. Meadows?
Well, I did not catch that for the success criteria.
Okay.
My group did.
Just making sure it's the style that they're looking for. I mean, if they're researching all these different artists have different styles, their painting has to look like that if they learn what they're supposed to learn.
Right, so the big thing is making sure students understand what they have to do in the lesson to be successful, and communicating that with them throughout the process, and through the process of the lesson, giving them feedback on their artwork, giving them feedback on their research that they're doing about art history, listening to the student discussions throughout the lesson. Those are all important things that the teacher can be doing to give feedback throughout the lesson. All right, so next thing we'll get to is student to teacher, teacher to student, and student to student feedback. I'm going to address student to teacher, and then Ms. Hines will pick up from there. But John Hattie says when teachers seek or at least are open to feedback from students as to what students know, what they understand, where they make errors, when they have misconceptions, when they are not engaged, then teaching and learning can be synchronized and powerful. Feedback to teachers helps make learning visible. So the big thing I get from this paragraph is teachers being open to student feedback. That can be scary in some school settings where you're scared to figure out what the students think about your teaching. I know at my last school I got some pretty aggressively bad feedback, especially as a young teacher, but it's something that can help the students in their learning process. An example, a friend of mine he's teaching government for the first time in Williamson County, and he tried to kind of change his teaching style up this year and not do so much direct instruction. He came up with like all these lessons and interactive group work for the students to do, and the first test they took, all the students bombed it. And so he was very confident going into the test of how they would do, and then after the test he just asked them what happened, and they said, well, we didn't feel like you explained enough, and we were in our groups, and we don't feel like we got enough direct instruction. So he retaught it, he figured out what worked for them, and he changed it up, and now his students are doing better on quizzes and tests because he figured out, what meets their needs a little better. The other paper you had on your desk, that is something that I passed out at the end of last year. So after my students took the AP US History exam, I created a series or a survey for them to answer. And I wanted to know what they felt really prepared about for the AP US History exam. I wanted to know what content from all of US history they were not comfortable with, effective types of review. And so that's been very beneficial to me this year. And I've figured out that I need to, focus on the Gilded Age after the Civil War a lot better. That was a big struggle that I saw from a lot of students. I found out that my students really like Albert I.O. And so instead of doing that 1 month before the exam, where I really pushed it hard last year, I'm doing monthly Albert I.O. assignments this year so that they can keep reviewing continuously. And so, that's been very helpful to me, but what's the big drawback to what I did with this survey?
After the fact?
Right, it helps this year's students. It doesn't do anything for my kids last year. So if I had been doing this throughout the year, then that would have been a lot more effective in reaching them, and then maybe some of the students that made 3s, I could have gotten them to make 4s, or the students who made 2s, I could have gotten them passing. So this is something that I want to implement a little more this year. And with that in mind, I heard that Ms. Morris was doing something very effective in her classes that she shared with me, and she can jump in. But basically, what Ms. Morris does is she has her students do a weekly feedback form where they go into this Google Doc, they answer a series of questions, and she gets live feedback throughout the year on a weekly basis from her students. And she can share in more detail with what she does, but she puts all of the responses into a Google Doc form, and she's able to respond back to the students, so she's giving them feedback after they give her feedback. Do you want to explain it?
So the Google form automatically populates the Google Sheet, so I don't have to do any kind of sorting there. The program does it for me. I had a friend create a script for me that I'm happy to share with anybody, but where it says my comment, I just type in a comment, and if he scrolls over to the left, go all the way over to the left, you see the send button? I hit the send button, and it sends an email to every student who has a comment without me having to open their email and find their email or whatever. It just does it automatically for me. And then it timestamps when I send them the email. And I can take the responses and put them in word clouds and notice what words pop up the most. Or if the student has, everybody's saying warrants, then that's my remediation for the next week. It allows me to call in specific students based on what they want. You said you needed warrant, I'll see you on Monday. You said you needed math or grammar, I'll see you on Tuesday. And it's also started 116 individual dialogues with students about their learning. And so they are much more comfortable coming to me about English stuff, which wasn't the case before. They are blowing up my study hall, which I guess is what we want.
So yeah, that's definitely a great option for you. And again, she said that she'd be willing to share this. I may try to do this on a monthly basis or a bi-weekly basis. So keep that in mind as you look at getting student feedback from your students. So I will now turn it over to Ms. Hines, and she will continue.